The FBI and other intelligence organizations are reporting that they don't believe that there is a link between the New Orleans massacre by a former master sergeant in the Army and the explosion of a CyberTruck in Las Vegas by a former Green Beret. They say they're not linked, that they're not connected, that they're not both terrorist acts, and that nobody is responsible. I disagree. I'm Michael Popok. You're on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. They are linked. They may not be forensically linked. These two may not have coordinated with each other to cause mass hysteria, to make a political statement, to murder people, but they are linked and connected. And let me explain what I'm talking about. I'm not here to tell you I've got inside information or knowledge that the former 10-year U.S. Army vet, U.S. citizen born and raised in Texas, who perpetrated this terrible, heinous, cowardly act of murdering innocents on Bourbon Street in New Orleans on the day before the Sugar Bowl. It coordinated his efforts with the Green Beret, who apparently took his own life, but also coordinated the explosion of a Cybertruck that may have killed somebody else other than himself. I'm not saying they were on the phone together. I'm not saying they were coordinated. But they only exist in a Trumpian world. They only exist in a world following the first Trump administration, his campaign rhetoric of violence and hate, and his campaign rhetoric of violence and hate on the way into the administration. I mean, even his own social media posts, because he had to make himself the center of the story with 15 grieving families in New Orleans, even Donald Trump's own social media post immediately tried to make it a political argument and tried to argue in some way so that the first responders who listened to the news first would believe that it was done by undocumented immigration people, undocumented aliens. There was a lot of false clamor on social media the night of New Orleans. Oh, the truck went from the Mexican border into the United States. I mean, that truck was rented through an app service that allows you to rent your neighbor's cars. It might have been in Mexico at one time, but not because of this guy. This guy lived in Texas. He was born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, near the Louisiana border. Been to New Orleans a number of times, right? Drove there for mass destruction. I posit that a guy like that, with the mental illnesses that he had, with his attempts at terrorism, doesn't exist in a world where Donald Trump doesn't exist. In other words, Trump exists, therefore this guy, ergo this guy exists, and is given his own perverse license to act out because Donald Trump has granted himself a license to breach the social contract, to be immoral in word and deed. And this perpetuates a cycle that we're now in the middle of, the Trumpian cycle. And we see another version of it 4 or 5 hours later in Las Vegas by another member of the armed forces, former member of the armed forces, a former Green Beret at that, who purposely rented, obviously, a Cybertruck. Could have rented anything. Could have rented a Ford Taurus, or a Hyundai or Subaru. He rented a Cybertruck, obviously, to stick his finger in the eye of President Elon Musk and blow it up in front of Trump Tower to stick his finger in the eye of the other president, Donald Trump, and make a political statement. And we're lucky that he used fireworks instead of dynamite or C4 or some other explosive. And he could have blown that Cybertruck sky high and killed a lot of innocent people. But they are connected because the person who does that doesn't exist in the world where Donald Trump doesn't exist. No Donald Trump, no exploding Cybertruck in front of a Vegas property named after Donald Trump, I assure you. And so the FBI and the others won't make the connection because forensically, from an evidence standpoint, there is no connection. But emotionally, psychologically, there is a connection because these people don't do this without having been given permission from the top, the tone from the top being set by Donald Trump. When you have a corrupt, depraved, immoral, lawless person who's going to occupy the highest office of the land and of the world, what message does that send? You know, if he can act that way, everybody thinks that they're Donald Trump. And for those that are on the other side, they feel hopeless because of what Donald Trump stands for. I'm talking about the CyberTruck guy. Now, the weaponization or radicalization of the U.S. citizen, let me repeat that, the U.S. citizen, not foreigner, not undocumented, in the U.S. military, who worked at Deloitte and Touche, who worked at Arthur Andersen, who worked in consultancy firms, who tried to run a real estate brokerage until finances and other things brought him down low. And then he became radicalized in Islam, and he decided to take a ISIS flag with him on the way to running over and snuffing out 15 Americans' lives and others' lives, including apparently a couple of Israeli citizens who had the misfortune of being out on Bourbon Street at 3 o'clock in the morning. And who hasn't done that? That guy doesn't exist without it. When you have a party that ignores mental health, when you have a party that promotes radicalization because its own party is radicalized and its language is radicalized, then you get that guy. He's born from that cesspool. School shootings, the same thing. When you have a party that won't stand up for American children, won't stand up for people who go to church and synagogue, won't stand up for people who go to bowling alleys and supermarkets, and would rather stand up for arms manufacturers, gun manufacturers, the NRA, the National Rifle Association and the rest, and sport hunting and everything else. Over that, then you get school shootings that happen. We've already had almost 350 school shootings this year alone. Think how the rest of the world looks at us. Think how the rest of the world looks at us. Jan 6th, 4 years ago, 2,500 to 3,000 Americans thought it was okay. In fact, they thought they were given license and direction from Donald Trump to go attack the seat of our democracy and try to burn it to the ground and hang and kill anybody they found inside. Right? That wasn't an act of political First Amendment speech. That was an act of violence perpetrated, fomented by Donald Trump and the Republican Party, who needs that level of seething animosity, seething at each other's throats with other Americans in order to exist. It is their raison d'etre. It is their existential component, without which they don't exist. They only exist in a bubbling cauldron of hate. So you got Jan 6, do a through line. School shootings, right? You got a party that ignores mental health and won't invest in it, ignores logical gun control, and won't. And to be clear, for those that think, oh, Popok, he's a lib, or the stuff that sometimes I get sent to me, he's a libtard, fat ass libtard. I love hearing that. By the way, my wife will tell you that that's not true. However, I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the right to bear arms for self-protection. I also believe it should be regulated. Okay? I also believe you should have a concealed weapons permit. You should be required to go through training that's frequently updated. You should be registered. So should your weapon. So should your bullets. And if you have a mental health problem or drinking problem or drug problem, you shouldn't be allowed, or edibles problem, you shouldn't be allowed to have a gun. But when you have a party that's against sensible gun control and against mental health, what do you think's going to happen? Right? People are going to pick up a gun in order to become famous. We just had another case, right? We can debate all day long whether Luigi Mangione's intention was to send a warning shot to the healthcare industry and the big insurance by shooting into the back of the executive. We can debate all day long whether that was an act of political violent terrorism or not. But certainly it doesn't exist in a world where Donald Trump doesn't exist. Take Donald Trump out of the equation. These are not things that we do to fellow Americans, not when we're in a right mind. And so I had to scrunch up my face, and it just pissed the crap out of me. Mixed metaphor there. When I heard that the FBI threw up their hands and said, there's no connection between New Orleans and Vegas. There is. And I just outlined it. And I'll continue to call it out here on Legal AF. I got a new show, Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Popok Live, Unshackled, Take No Prisoners, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, YouTube from Midas Touch. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button here as well, and that'll keep this content coming to you uninterrupted. So until my next hot take, my next Legal AF contribution, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.